On June 16th, 2026, the Trump administration moved the IDEA, or Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, and IEPs from being overseen by the Department of Education to the Department of Health and Human Services, or HHS. And that has real ramifications for individuals with disabilities and parents and caregivers of individuals with disabilities throughout the United States. I hear this all the time from family members. So I've asked Anne to put together a synopsis of it, and then I'll respond at the end of that.
If you're a parent or legal guardian of a child with disabilities in the public school system, it's imperative to know you and your child's rights. If your child receives an Individualized Education Program, or IEP, that you don't agree with, or you feel your child's IEP is not being implemented correctly, you have a few options. You can dispute your case with the school and use a mediator, free of charge. You can also file a complaint with your state's Department of Education. It's required by law that your state investigates in 60 days or less. You can also represent yourself and your case, or hire a special education attorney and initiate a due process hearing. This legal procedure allows you and/or your attorney to state your case in front of an impartial hearing officer. You're also allowed to file with the U.S. Department of Education's Office for Civil Rights. Additionally, if for some reason you believe your child should have an IEP, but your child's school has not initiated one, you can request that the school complete an evaluation of your child. This request can be completed by writing a letter to your child's school principal and the Director of Special Education Services. The school must respond within 60 days with an answer regarding if they will complete an evaluation or not. If they complete an evaluation, it must be at no cost to the child's family. But if the school states they will not evaluate the child, they must provide a rationale in the form of a letter. That letter is also required to provide resources and steps for the parent to take in order to further advocate for their child and refute the dispute. On a related note, as of June 16, 2026, the Trump administration has moved IDEA, or Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, and IEPs from being overseen by the Department of Education and now falls under the purview of the Department of Health and Human Services. What this means is that while no rights of students and their families have been changed, critics are concerned the quality of care will decrease. They state there is most likely not enough overhead in the Department of Health and Human Services to keep track of responsibilities associated with IDEA and monitor outcomes related to students with disabilities and their families. We will now hear from John, who will give us his comments related to IDEA now that it's overseen by the Department of Health and Human Services.
A couple months ago, the Trump administration moved the IDEA, or Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, oversight from the Department of Education to HHS. And this has some very real ramifications for individuals with disabilities. I want to talk about a macro and a micro as far as the ramifications are concerned for individuals with disabilities. Let me start with the bigger picture. There is a long-standing debate, long-standing work that the advocacy community of people with disabilities have done over the years, moving disability from a medical model to a social model. What do I mean? Longest time, it was the medical model that was considered the way to look at disability, meaning that when somebody is born with a disability, there should be a medical fix to that disability. Prime example, me specifically, born in 1968, had my first meeting with doctors that would make prosthetics, started prosthetics coming out of World War I, World War II, even the Civil War, if you look back in the history of accommodation. But then more specifically, Korea and certainly Vietnam with the number of amputations. So when I was born in 1968 in the height of the Vietnam War, it was very easy for my parents to find a doctor in East Orange, New Jersey at the Kessler Institute that would start to think about prosthetics for me. I think I got my first prosthetics at 4 or 5 years old. I resisted them. I ended up starting to walk with them in first or second grade, and then had to wear them for 3 hours a day in grade school up until sixth grade. And quite frankly, it was torture. Now, my body is symmetrical. My arms are the same length. My legs are the same length. So I can walk under my own power. I can use my arms like other people use use their hands. But the truth is, it was a lot harder to use prosthetics. So that's my example. That's the medical model of fixing my disability to make me like others by putting hooks on the end of my arms, putting mechanical elbows and mechanical knees, which didn't work, and I'd fall down and I couldn't get up. So the medical model of disability is fix it. But since the civil rights movement, especially since the disability work that people like Judy Heumann and Ed Roberts did, we started to get society to look at the social model of disability, meaning it's society and its limitations in society that's disabling us. And so the work that's done in the education system, which we're talking about now, but quite frankly, in the physical world, ramps, elevators, etc., the less we can make society disabling of us, the more able-bodied we are. Now go to technology. Look how technology has leveled the playing field for a lot of individuals with disabilities to be able to communicate and work, commerce, etc. So we had moved away from the medical model to the social model. And in the education system, the social model was independent education programs so that each student had a platform and a roadmap on how to be best educated. And that was great. By moving the IEPs and IDEA away from Department of Education to educate people with disabilities, because everybody should have a free and appropriate public education, which is an offset of the civil rights laws, back to HHS, now you're back to more of a medical model of fixing. And that's the macro of why this is really troubling. The micro is when you get down to individuals with disabilities and why this might be a problem. And that's what happens to the individual with a disability with an IEP in public school, and the public school seems to lose funding. What happens? I think in the month of July, I saw this on CNBC. In the month of July alone, there were 50,000 education jobs lost. 50,000 in July alone from local municipalities and counties in local schools. 50,000 jobs. How many of those jobs were lost that were supporting individuals with disabilities? It's a question nobody's answered. But if 50,000 jobs are lost alone this summer in 1 month, that means there's less funding from the federal government through the education system into the schools. So if there's less funding, that includes us, quite frankly. And if there's less funding for individuals with disabilities, and we're back under HHS, which means it's more of a medical model, then the fix for individuals with disabilities who want an education won't be more services inside the public school system. And this is the problem. Because in the 60s and 70s, we fought against institutionalization. Institutionalization was what happened prior to the IDEA, that we're going to house individuals with disabilities in hospitals and work centers because it's, quote, easier and more financially stable, because the medical model of fixing is to push people away. On a micro scale, that means those people in your local community that had IEPs that were on the fringe will probably still be okay, but what about those that need the most support? Are we really talking about institutionalization again? And that's the road we're going down. I've traveled the world, thankfully, being an advocate for individuals with disabilities, and had the opportunity to go to China and meet a school over in China. I had the opportunity to speak to that school, and very naively, I asked the question, in the communities around that school, where are the students with disabilities? And the answer that I was given by probably somebody from a local government, which I didn't know at the time, was, we house our individuals with disabilities out of the city so that people aren't seen. That's troubling. It was amazing that they were honest. Let's hope that's the honesty. But that's troubling because there is an economy that we're fighting against, an economic warfare, and that's how they value their individuals with disabilities. Is that what's going to happen in the United States under a medical model of people with disabilities, we go back to institutionalization? I certainly hope not. We need to think about the true ramifications for our brothers and sisters, children, cousins in our own community when we vote. And we need to ask tough questions. And we cannot get caught up into the MS Now, Fox Newses of the world. What we do have to get caught up in is, where do we want our dollars to go? Where do we truly want our people to go? And do we value our citizens in our local community? We're in a K-shaped economy. The rich are getting richer. The middle class and the poor are getting poorer. And so that means there's less dollars for all of us. We need to be aware of that. And we need to truly ask ourselves, what do we want for our children? Yes, maybe it might look like a small step moving from Department of Education to HHS on IEPs and the Individuals with Disability Education Act, but it's not a small step for parents of children with individuals with disabilities. And when they go back to school in August and September and find out that their support staff have been eliminated, it becomes very real. Please pay attention to what's going on in this administration in your local states around supporting individuals with disabilities, where the funding comes from the federal government, and how it trickles down through the states to local municipalities. It's so very, very important.